An advocacy group that tries to break down barriers for Boston families recently got a vote of confidence from the City Council. To tell us about the Council's support and the efforts to advance a Parents' Bill of Rights is the Executive Director of Parenting Journey, Imari Paris Jeffries. Thank you very much for being with us, Imari.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me back.
I want to start with the Parents' Bill of Rights. What kind of things does this include?
Well, it fundamentally includes three things. Parents and families' rights to a safe neighborhood, parents and families' rights to afford and have a living wage, and families and parents' rights to live in a community that is diverse. And when we say diverse, that's different ages, generations, gender groups, immigration status, et cetera, just a full, complete neighborhood.
So why did you take the step to get this kind of a recognition from the City Council?
You know, we thought that it was important given the fact that the Parent Bill of Rights originated from families who are connected with Parenting Journey. It wasn't an idea of our staff who sat around and said, hey, we do policy, this is what we want to do. This was really about talking to parents, asking them what would it take for this Commonwealth, for this city, to be a city that's friendly for parents, and this is what they came up with.
What's interesting, I mean, a lot of your agenda concerns poverty, helping people overcome that. But it's interesting that you're not talking about poverty as an individual deficit. You're talking about maybe as a hurdle that any one of us could have to contend with.
That's right, and I think circumstances change, and I think as this city is thriving, Boston and the surrounding areas has to be a city and a community and a commonwealth that people of different economic statuses are able to live and afford to live. We can't be a city of one economic group. It has to be a city where different people from different economic groups come, live together, live beside each other, and all thrive together.
One of the things that you were looking for, and which you made some progress on, is raising the minimum wage for families. There's been a debate on how that could help people or hurt people. Why do you think that this is something that's going to help?
Well, here's what we do know. We know in Massachusetts, in order to afford a two-bedroom apartment, the average two-bedroom apartment in Boston, Greater Boston, is about $2,600. And so someone making the minimum wage when it was $11 an hour would have to work 96 hours to afford a two-bedroom apartment. Now, if you have to work 96 hours, how could you possibly be available both emotionally or physically, or be able to take time away to go to a kid's conference if you're worried about working that 96 hours just to pay the rent? And so we have to really have a conversation around what is the minimum that people need to live, to make in order to live in the state, in order to afford to live in the city.
Well, one of the other things that happened at the State House this summer was that there was an agreement reached about family and medical leave, and a lot of businesses saying this could be tough for them too. But why did families need this so much?
Well, here's what we do know. We know that the first 1,000 years in the life of a child is critical. What the language that they hear, the amount of books that are read to them, the amount of nurturing and bonding that parents and children need in those first 1,000 days are critical. And so paid medical leave, paid family leave allows families to be available for their children during those first 90 days of their childbirth.
And speaking of hurdles, it could also mean an aging parent suddenly takes a turn for the worse, and someone's got to take care of their parent, and they're at risk of losing their job.
Well, they say that you could tell a lot about the society by how they take care of their most vulnerable, and those most vulnerable usually are children and older adults. And so I think this is a commitment by our state, our Commonwealth, to say, hey, this is a state that cares about our children. This is a state that cares about older adults.
This has been the news, and we're talking with Imari Paris Jeffries from Parenting Journey. Imari, another challenge right now is immigration. What are you concerned about exactly here?
I think what we do know is, regardless of where people stand on immigration, we think that the best things that can happen to families is that they're together. We support families being together, regardless of their status. And so as the debate around do we build a wall or do we not build a wall in our southern borders occur, we think that the best thing that we can do as a society is meet the values of family values, which is keep families together.
Chris, another thing that often gets overlooked with immigrant families, you could have different kinds of immigration status within the same nuclear family, right?
That's right, and and I think it's complicated, it's difficult, and I think when you are worried about your status and you're worried about what would happen to you day to day, one thing that we know to be true is that there's a lot of anxiety and fear that takes place amongst a family that have different immigration statuses. And so we think it's important to provide support to families who have different statuses, and we think it's important to keep families together.
You're concerned about racial inequality as well, and there are so many racial disparities that could be run up, but which are the ones that you focus on the most?
I think, economic, this is a city that is priding itself in the economic boom. I think short of Silicon Valley, there is a booming sector in technology. And so we have to make sure that all of our citizens, from Roxbury, Dorchester to Mattapan to the South End, South Boston, and Austin, Brighton, all children that live in Boston, Greater Boston, Cambridge area have the same opportunity for these high-tech jobs. And so I think when we're thinking and looking at the future, what we do know that the jobs of my children, who my youngest is 13, they haven't been invented today. And so I think it's important that people have the opportunity to have an education that prepares them for the future.
Now, it's interesting. What you're also concerned with here is not that so much the individual deliberate racism of somebody in a company, but you're talking about structures that hold people back. Well, what does that mean?
I think when we think about the nonprofit sector, unfortunately, we're a sector that's built upon philanthropy. And I think sometimes we're unable to have the conversations around what our organizations need to thrive. And so when we think about structural racism, I think one of the conversation has to be around how the nonprofit sector has challenges paying people a living wage while they're doing the good work of breaking cycles of poverty. And so when we think about a structure that pays people a wage that they can afford to live in Boston while they're working day to day to help people break the cycles of poverty isn't a structure that is, I think, conducive to long-term change.
Well, your Parent Advisory Council has more work ahead, and of course, one of the things you're looking at is access to affordable housing. What are you going to be doing about that?
That's one of the things next on our horizon. I think we're having some conversations in our city where our headquarters is based in Somerville to see how parents' voice can be involved. Think about when new housing is developed, how it is inclusive to include people who not only can afford market rate housing, but people who are of different economic statuses. We know that communities thrive when there's a diversity of people, economic statuses, occupations, gender, race, et cetera. And so we want to ensure that every neighborhood in Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville has that same makeup.
And finally, Imari, if people want some more information, is there a place they can go online and get that?
They could find us online at parentingjourney.org, and we're also on Twitter and Facebook.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Imari Paris Jeffries from Parenting Journey.